Prime Minister Johnson and I had a very productive meeting. We discharged and discussed a broad range of issues on which the United Kingdom and the United States are working in very close cooperation. We affirmed the special relationship, as is not said lightly, the special relationship between our people, and we renewed our commitment to defending the enduring democratic values that both our nations share, that are the strong foundation of our partnership. 80 years ago, Prime Minister Winston Churchill and President Franklin Roosevelt signed an agreement known as the Atlantic Charter. It was a statement of first principles, a promise that the United Kingdom and the United States would meet the challenges of their age and they would meet it together. Today, we build on that commitment with a revitalized Atlantic Charter, updated to reaffirm that promise while speaking directly to the key challenges of this century: cybersecurity, emerging technologies, global health, and climate change. We discussed our common goals for driving ambitious global action to address the climate crisis. And the Climate Leaders Summit that I hosted in April was in part about helping drive forward the momentum toward the critical COP26 that the UK will host in Glasgow later this year. We talked about the shared sacrifices our service members have made, bravely serving side by side in Afghanistan for close to 20 years. The UK was with us from the start, as they always are, equally committed to rooting out the terrorist threat. And now we're coordinating our withdrawal together. And of course, we talked about how our two nations can together lead the global fight against COVID-19. That's been a major focus of the G7 under British leadership, particularly in focusing and coordinating our resources to help vaccinate the world. And tonight, I'm making an historic announcement regarding America's leadership in the fight against COVID-19. America knows firsthand the tragedies of this pandemic. We've had more people die in the United States than anywhere in the world. Nearly 600,000 of our fellow Americans, moms, dads, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, grandparents, more deaths from COVID-19 in the United States than from World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, and 9/11 combined. We know the tragedy. We also know the path to recovery. The United States has now vaccinated 64% of our adults with at least one shot. Just 4.5 months ago, we were at only 5% with one shot. It took a Herculean effort on the part of our government to manage one of the biggest and I would say most complicated logistical challenges in our history. It took the ingenuity of scientists, building on decades of research to develop a vaccine. It took the full capacity of American companies manufacturing and delivering the vaccines around the clock. And as a result, we have the lowest number of daily deaths since the first day of this pandemic. Our economy is rebounding. Our vaccination program has already saved tens of thousands of lives, with that count growing each day, and has allowed millions of Americans to get back to living their lives. And from the beginning of my presidency, we've been clear-eyed that we need to attack this virus globally as well. This is about our responsibility, our humanitarian obligation to save as many lives as we can, and our responsibility to our values. We value the inherent dignity of all people. In times of trouble, Americans reach out to offer help and offer a helping hand. That's who we are. And when we see people hurting and suffering anywhere around the world, we seek to help as best we can. That's why under both Republican and Democratic presidents, the United States has made transformative commitments to bolster global health. Commitments under President Bush like PEPFAR, which changed the global fight against HIV/AIDS. And in this moment, Our values call on us to do everything that we can to vaccinate the world against COVID-19. It's also in America's self-interest. As long as the virus rages elsewhere, there is a risk of new mutations that could threaten our people. We know that raging COVID-19 in other countries holds back global growth, raises instability, and weakens governments. And as we've seen in the United States, with evidence clear day by day, the key to reopening and growing economies is to vaccinate your people. Our vaccination program has helped the American economy begin to recover from the worst economic crisis in a century. Over 2 million new jobs created just in the last 4 months since I've become president. An historic decline in long-term unemployment. Businesses reopening, and a projected economic growth of 6.9%, the fastest in nearly 4 decades in America. Just as the American economy is recovering, it is in all of our interest to have the global economy begin to recover as well. And that won't happen unless we can get this pandemic under control worldwide. That's why, as I said in my address to the joint session of Congress in April, America will be the arsenal of vaccines in our fight against COVID-19, just as America was the arsenal of democracy during World War II. Over the past 4 months, we've taken a number of steps toward this historic effort. We have contributed more than any nation to COVAX, a collective global effort that is delivering COVID-19 vaccines across the world. We've supported manufacturing efforts abroad through our partnerships with Japan, India, and Australia, known as the Quad. We've shared doses with our neighbors, Canada and Mexico. And in addition, 3 weeks ago, with America's vaccines supplied secured, and with confidence we have enough vaccines to cover every American who wants one, we announced that we would donate 80 million doses of our own vaccine in-house now to supply the world by the end of June. Many of these doses are shipping to countries around the world as we speak. And today, we're taking a major step that will supercharge the global fight against this pandemic. In my direction, the United States will purchase an additional 500 million doses from Pfizer vaccine, that will donate nearly 100 low and lower middle income countries. They will be the beneficiaries. Let me say that again. The United States will purchase 500 million doses of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine to donate to nearly 100 nations that are in dire need in the fight against this pandemic. That's a historic step, the largest single purchase and donation of COVID-19 vaccines by any single country ever. Importantly, this is the mRNA vaccine, which has proven to be extremely effective against COVID-19 and every known variant of that virus thus far. These 500 million vaccines will start to be shipped in August, as quickly as they roll off the manufacturing line. 200 million of these doses will be delivered this year, 2021, and 300 million more will be delivered in the first half of 2022. And let me be clear. Just as with the 80 million doses we previously announced, the United States is providing these 500,000 doses with no strings attached. Let me say it again, with no strings attached. Our vaccine donations don't include pressure for favors or potential concessions. We're doing this to save lives, to end this pandemic. That's it, period. I also want to thank Albert Bourla, Pfizer's CEO and chairman, for joining me today. We've gotten to know each other over the last few months. He and I and his entire team have he's really stepped up at this critical stage in our fight against the pandemic. And the plan is for 500 million doses that we'll be sending around the world to be produced in the United States including at Pfizer's manufacturing plant in Kalamazoo, Michigan. 80 years ago, not too far from that plant in Kalamazoo, in the Detroit area, American workers built tanks and planes and vehicles that helped defeat the global threat of fascism in World War II. They built what became known as the arsenal of democracy. Now, a new generation of American men and women, working with today's latest technology, is going to build a new arsenal to defeat the current enemy of world peace, health, and stability, COVID-19. Albert was gracious enough to welcome me to Kalamazoo plant back in February. It's incredible, the ingenuity, the care, the safety that goes into every single dose as I toured the entire plant. Most of all, when you're there, you feel the pride of every worker there feels, how the pride they feel in what they're doing. I've been to a lot of plants. I'm a big union guy. I've been doing it my whole career. But you could see the looks on their faces. They were proud. I mean it sincerely, they were proud of what they were doing. They knew what they were doing. American workers will now produce vaccines to save lives of people in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. People they will never meet and have never met. Places they've never visited and probably won't have an opportunity to. But lives saved all the same, thanks to American leadership, American workers, hard work, and values. Let me close with this. This is a monumental commitment by the American people. As I said, we're a nation full of people who step up at times of need to help our fellow human beings, both at home and abroad. We're not perfect, but we step up. Well, we're not alone in this endeavor. That's the point I want to make. We're going to help lead the world out of this pandemic, working alongside our global partners. Under the UK chairmanship of the G7, democracies of the world are poised to deliver as well. This U.S. contribution is the foundation for additional coordinated efforts to help vaccinate the world. The British government, the Prime Minister, has led a strong campaign to get people vaccinated across the UK. And I'm grateful they're making their own generous donation. Tomorrow, the G7 nations will be announcing the full scope of our commitment, our meaning the G7. And I want to thank all of my G7 partners for stepping up to recognize our responsibility to meet the moment. I'm looking forward to working with my counterparts on these efforts in the coming days and much more. One final point I want to make clear. This is not the end of our efforts to fight COVID-19 or vaccinate the world. We have to turn manufactured doses into shots in arms to protect people and communities. That's why the United States is already providing hundreds of millions in funding to support last-minute vaccination efforts, including new funding from Congress as part of the American Rescue Plan, and working with programs in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. We're going to keep manufacturing doses, donating doses, getting jabs, as they say here in the UK, in arms, until the world has beaten this virus. I want to thank you all. Now I'd like to turn it over to my friend, the CEO and chairman of Pfizer, Albert Bourla. Albert, it's all yours. And again, personally, thank you for stepping up.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President, and it is, of course, a great honor to be with you today for this historic announcement. As the G7 countries come together for this critical summit, the eyes of the world are on the leaders of these powerful nations to help solve the ongoing COVID-19 crisis. While great progress has been made in many developed nations, the world is now asking the G7 leaders to shoulder the responsibility to help vaccinate people in all countries. Mr. President, I know from our conversations that we agree that every man, woman, and child on the planet, regardless of financial condition, race, religion, or geography, deserve access to life-saving COVID-19 vaccines. And once again, the United States has answered the call. And we are grateful to you and your administration for your leadership in this front. Today, we are providing 500 million doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine to the world's poorest nations. This will significantly enhance our ability to meet our goal of providing 2 billion doses of the vaccine to low and middle-income countries over the next 18 months. Thanks to the ingenuity of so many scientists and the dedication of so many manufacturing workers, today we can see clearly the light at the end of the tunnel. But we still have work to do. And I can assure you, Mr. President, that we will be relentless in pursuing more solutions to end the pandemic. Just this week, we began dosing participants aged 5 to 11 years old in a global phase 2-3 study. And as we speak, we continue our studies in pregnant women. We are also closely monitoring and addressing the emerging variants. We are testing our vaccine's response to newly arising variants, and we are coordinating with public health authorities around the world on surveillance efforts. So far, data show that none of the existing variant strains has escaped the protection provided by our vaccine. I repeat, none, not one. Still, we have built a process to develop within 100 days a new vaccine if needed, God forbid. Our scientists are also pursuing an oral treatment against COVID-19. Initial indications are promising, and if things go well, we could apply for approval before the end of this year. But I wanted to finish by coming back to the importance of your announcement today, Mr. President. In a pandemic, everyone is only as protected as their neighbors. Their neighbors down the street, as well as their global neighbors around the world. Today's announcement with the US government gets us closer to our goal and significantly enhances our ability to save even more lives across the globe. Mr. President, I want to thank you for your leadership, vision, and partnership. We look forward to continue to work with your administration to ensure that science wins the battle against COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, do you believe, Mr. President, do you believe your meeting with Putin can change his behavior in a way sanctions have not yet?
Mr. President, did you warn Prime Minister Johnson?
The president having questions shouted at him there, President Biden, as he, let's listen in case he gives an answer. Occasionally he does. President Biden speaking there with Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer. The president announced that the United States and Pfizer would be donating 500 million doses to 92 what are called lower income countries. The president also talked about how that was in America's national interest and also a part of America's values. I'd like to bring in Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes, who is traveling with the president. Nancy, the announcement today, it seems consistent with what the president has been telegraphing even since he was a candidate, which is the idea that America is back. How does this announcement meet what he's been talking about?
Well, there's quite possibly no greater form of soft power in the world right now, John, than the distribution of vaccines. This is something that almost every country is looking for. And it isn't just the poorer nations that are going to be getting these vaccinations from the donation that the president announced. Every nation practically is looking for more vaccines. South Korea, for example, has only managed to vaccinate 6% of its population. So this decision to purchase at the cost of $3.5 billion, 500 million vaccine doses, sends a message to the entire world that the U.S. wants to lead the global effort to combat COVID. And interestingly, the president said in his remarks that the U.S. can be an arsenal of vaccines, just as it was an arsenal of democracy during World War II. So a return to the notion of the United States as the world's policeman and sometimes the world's benefactor.
That's right. It was thick with World War II references. He also talked about the Atlantic Charter and renewing that with the United Kingdom, that also an 80-year-old agreement. And so the America being back, tending to its alliances, that's one part of the president's trip. But as we could hear from the shouted questions, he's got a meeting in less than a week with Vladimir Putin. The White House and the president seem to be sending kind of mixed signals. On the one hand, saying they want that relationship on more stable footing. On the other hand, talking about confrontation with Russia. How do you see those double messages?
Exactly. In some ways, this president has been stepping up his tough talk in the past 24, 48 hours. He's well aware that there has been some criticism of the fact that he's even meeting with Vladimir Putin right now. There are critics who have questioned the timing and the wisdom of sitting down with the leader of a country that has been housing cyber criminals who have been hacking U.S. companies just in the past few weeks. So President Biden is looking to make it clear this is not going to be a friendly chit-chat. He said yesterday, I'm going to sit down with Mr. Putin and tell him what I want him to know. On the other hand, the White House doesn't want to antagonize Vladimir Putin right before the summit. So Mr. Biden is also saying that he's having this meeting because he wants to engender a more stable, more predictable relationship. And you're hearing that echoed by the White House aides that we speak to as well. They say they're not expecting any big deliverables out of this meeting. That's normally what you see when you've got a big summit like this. They're ready to announce big decisions at the end of it. This time they say that's probably not going to happen, that Mr. Biden just wants an opportunity to sit down face to face with the Russian president and express to him what the U.S. expects out of the relationship.
All right, Nancy Cordes, no deliverables on Russia, but deliverables on the Pfizer vaccine. Thanks so much, Nancy, for being with us there with the president at Tregenna Castle, where the G7 is meeting. Let's bring in now Ed O'Keefe, who joins us now from Washington. Ed, the president has framed this trip and all of its many parts as a return to a kind of global position for the United States where it plays a leadership role across the world. You were just in Guatemala. Tell us how they view the Biden administration and this message of taking leadership in the world again.
Yeah, and that was the beginning of the Biden administration's foreign policy week, if you will, with the vice president there for meetings with leaders in that country who are quite thrilled to hear that at least 500,000 doses are coming in the next few weeks from the United States directly, separate from this COVAX announcement. But I can tell you, having talked to people on the ground, having talked to health officials there's grave concern about how countries like Guatemala are going to be able to take in this contribution from the United States. For example, in a country of 17 million, only 3 freezer trucks that could conceivably hold the vaccine. So how do you quickly distribute it across the country? How do you train enough medical professionals to properly put those jabs in arms? That's a problem that's going to manifest itself across many of these lower income countries that are set to receive the doses. The other thing the president touched on that I think is quite true is the possibility that any delay in getting vaccine to these countries could cause political instability. If you're looking for some reason why the United States should be spending millions of dollars to distribute these vaccines, that certainly would be one. There will be real national security implications in parts of Latin America, Africa, Central Asia, if these vaccines don't get distributed quickly. But on the current timetable, they may not get into the arms of billions of people across the world until next spring. So it'll be interesting to see how that tracks and what the administration can do in the meantime.
That's right. Being the arsenal of vaccines takes more than just having the vaccine. There's a lot more work ahead. Ed O'Keefe in Washington, thank you. Our coverage will continue on our streaming network, CBSN, your local news, and tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm John Dickerson, CBS News, New York.
For news 24 hours a day, go to cbsnews.com.